was discussing with Olu when I invited him to do some names of artists to be involved in the project. Was that he was mentioning this kind of Connecticut art school. Of course, it's not, I mean, a building, it's not an institution, but he was considering it, as all those artists that are leaving the big cities to go to work in smaller realities where life is more kind of connected to nature. So it would be nice that you could introduce to us this idea of living New York and also your own work and your own approach to art. And also it would be nice also that you talk about the residency you're doing now.
Yeah, so it's all kind of interconnected in a way.
Yes, I can imagine.
So being where I am in Connecticut and the reasons of being there and working there outside of the city, and then also why I'm here, and a lot of that is connected with the idea of working within nature and working within local communities and creating, in a sense, not just a social practice, but a local practice and a really personal one-on-one connection that I seek to have within my work, with the way that I work within the communities that I go to. So, for example, in New Haven, I have a working studio there, and I actually am currently going to be working at Art Space. And so I'll be working with them, and I'll be helping them for the next 3 months coordinate their citywide open studios, which I've been a part of for about 3.5 years now, I think about 3 years. So it's nice to be on the other end and try to facilitate coordinating and helping artists and show their work. Working within Connecticut, I actually live an hour away from my studio. So I've moved even more into the country currently.
The entire world is looking at New York as the place where we have to be in order to develop our projects in the art world. But it seems that you're doing such a different. You decided to live a different lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think the peace and really just the space to think and the space to work in a quiet and in a little bit of a more low-key environment has really enabled me to take that practice and bring it to places like here in Australia at BigCi, where it is a lot more quiet and it's really low-key. I'm in a really rural area in Australia, really close to the Blue Mountains, which is about 35 minutes to an hour, depending on how far in the Blue Mountains you go. And just today, I actually met some local people that live here that are interested in being a part of my project. I'm performing with me in performing for my video and my work. And it's so sweet. We just sat down and we basically just talked about the local history and things going on in the different towns. And some of them even gave me jackets and warm clothing because it's so cold here and I only brought so much clothes. But it is so nice to make the connections, and it's like I'm not only meeting people that I'll be working with, but I'm also making friendships and making closer connections, which I really enjoy.
Well, yeah, and I would like you to tell us something about your work. It would be nice also to show your work.
And I have to go downstairs because I'm in a separate area. I don't know if you can kind of see.
Yeah, I see you. So perhaps you want to introduce, maybe you want to talk about your residency there?
Yeah, so this is something that I've been working on today. So the project that I'm doing here is the third part of my Three Sister series, which is based off of Three Sister stories. And I've gone to 3 different locations. The first one's in Sisters, Oregon, where it began, with the mountains there, the Cascade Range. It's a story that I made up about the geographical location of the Three Sisters. and more about the elements of the actual mountains. And then I went over into the second part of the series, which is, it was done at Elsewhere Living Museum in North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina. And I worked in the tri-state area with local organic farmers and other local people and the interns there. They also performed in the work. But I spent a lot of time in the landscape and talking to local farmers and asking them, what their experiences, and the whole piece was titled Sustainable. So I wanted to kind of get an idea of what it was like being organic farmer in an area that was predominantly GMO planting. And then the last part of the Three Sister story is here, and not quite Bilpin, but in New South Wales in the Blue Mountains. So I'm doing the story of the Three Sisters of the Blue Mountains here. Mm-hmm. And that's titled Dreamtime. And there's going to be a title that is conjuncted to that, and it's going to be called Stolen Dreams, Stolen Stories. So it talks a little bit about the political backing of the history of the colonial taking of the land here, and the Aboriginal people, and how a lot of their stories and a lot of their culture has been, in a sense, exploited.
And now, can you tell us more about the stories, these stories, and the title of the story?
Right, so the Three Sister stories are stories that exist within these locations or these places. The first one I made because I had a hard time finding it locally. I even went to the local library and I was given a story about this mountain here. So there was this kind of disconnect between the use of the Three Sister story and one not actually being told. So I called that title of that work Lost Myth. Mm-hmm. And then the second one was Sustainable, which is something that I based off the Three Sister story of corn, squash, and beans, which is a traditional companion planting that, in a sense, Thanksgiving kind of came out of in the U.S. And then the third one, there's a couple stories of the Three Sister Mountains here, but all of my work, I'm thinking about those stories, but I'm really thinking about the history and some other like local issues. It's an abstract story, so it's not like I'm reliving the story or playing it out. I'm using it more as another contemporary way to have a conversation about what's going on in every place.
Yeah, and then so this project, is it going to be a video at the end?
Mm-hmm. So there are videos that I make of each of these stories, mm-hmm. and I have a video component, but when it's installed, it's done as a whole installation.
Okay.
And depending on the size of the place and the venue that shows it, ideally there will be elements of performance that would happen either during the event or at a certain time of the event. But overall, there's video elements and sculptural elements that exist within the exhibition.
Okay, and how are you going to include these cloths that you're showing to us?
So this here is, it's a cyanotype mm-hmm. that I made from some of the local eucalyptus leaves and the ferns. And so a lot of the fauna and all the different, there's actually a storm that came through. There's a really windy storm that came through the other day. So a lot of the branches were knocked down. There's a lot of plants in the ground. So I just gathered actually a lot of the eucalyptus branches, and I'm printing them on the fabric. So this is what the performance will wear. And so I'll make this into a dress. And
okay, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so all the dresses and all the clothing are a little bit different in each piece. And so there's also other elements of that the Three Sisters wear. And so this is my component, sculptural component that I've produced.
What kind of materials have you used?
And so this is found cardboard. Mm-hmm. And then this right here, this is jute. And so this will be, I'm doing a macrame back in this one. And then I'll be putting feathers within it too.
So this that
parallels.
Is it going to be used?
Are you wearing it during the video?
Or just it's going to be shown as a sculpture?
And so all of the videos, the women that perform in the pieces, all of them have these backs.
Yeah.
They're just different. The last one was made out of corn husk. And so as it's installed, then it becomes a sculpture that's installed with the videos.
What do you get the inspiration from to have this kind of sculptures?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking a lot about women, femininity, deities, and how do you portray feminine deity without being too kind of like with too much of a loaded image. It was really tricky in the very first project to try to figure out how do I portray earth and strength and in a sense a really masculine kind of feeling within the form. And I was lucky enough to find this recycled cardboard. And it's actually wine crate shippers. So it's what they ship wine in. And I wanted to be strong and tough, but I want it to be light. So when the performers are wearing it, it's not heavy. And it's actually easy to ship because, I work remotely or I work in different places. So having to ship the things around and to move it around is really important, but most important so that the performers aren't weighed down by it.
Yeah, of course. And then when are the videos going to be ready?
The other two are already done, and this one, the rough cut, should be done by the end of September. But the audio for this one's going to be a little trickier because I'm wanting to try to connect with a local artist who plays an Aboriginal instrument.
But is it the story of the three sisters also written now? I mean, is it written?
I have one of them that I wrote. I actually wrote the story off the geographical facts of the mountains. So the story that I couldn't really find, I wrote one on things that I learned that explorers wrote and people who actually were navigating the mountains. The other ones I haven't really written because that's not my main concern. I'm actually more concerned in the oral tradition than I am in the written one.
I very much like your, this approach, the approach you have with your work and life in a way, because we are very much, we are all living in such a hectic world,
right,
where things are always going on so quickly. And then we rarely have the possibility to sit down and reflect. And then your approach seems to be actually, different because you're trying, I think, to find this time to reflect and understand things more deeply. And I find it very fascinating.
Yeah, so the time slowing down, that's a really good example of today, how I was working. It's been so windy here. And not sunny, and then sunny, but really windy. And it doesn't help with printing because all the leaves fly around. And so I found myself like watching the sun and watching the breeze. And I was just like, oh, come on, breeze. I was like talking to the wind and asking it to slow down or to be calmer. But it doesn't work like that. I wasn't really fighting, but just that, like really being conscious of the environment. And that's what I love about my work is it forces me to really take heed in the sun and the day and what's going on. Like, what does the sun look like on one location or a few locations every day? And how does that change? And in Australia, the light is totally different than anywhere I've ever been. So it's like a whole new thing to have to get used to.
I would like you to talk a little bit more about this story, this Three Sisters story. How have you discovered about it?
Yeah, so the first interest came because I was at a place called Sisters, Oregon, and I was doing research on the location there. But personally, it's been interesting because people ask me that all the time of why are you interested in that? And it's not just about that location, but I found a connection with the story when I was there because I have half sisters and 3 stepsisters. And I actually have a sister, so technically that would make 7 sisters. And just the other day, I was told the story about the 7 sisters, that there's actually 7 sisters in the 3 sisters mountains here, but the mountains fell apart. so you don't see them anymore. And so there's this interesting, I was like, oh wow, I find a connection there, and I feel connected to that. And I think it's interesting to be able to do that and to still, in a sense, live my life. Even though I'm doing contemporary art, I can still live my life in a way where I make connections with the world and the environment. And the work itself it lives as video. So, I like how there's this parallel between, it's transmedia storytelling. And I really am interested in what that means, and how do I continue to respect the oral tradition, but at the same time, build my work in a contemporary practice.
Okay. And then do you know the origin of this story?
Yeah, the origin of that story was told by a local Aboriginal elder to one other local Aboriginal person, who then told it to me. And so there's a lot of Aboriginal stories that have been changed and manipulated and translated into a colonial aspect of a story. And so that's where I'm actually interested in that translation, and how do I interpret that within my own work? And a lot of it is very complex, and it's very embedded. So the work looks very abstract, and it kind of is simplified, but at the same time, it's not that I'm simplifying it. I'm just doing it in a more abstract way.